Yeah, hi everyone. So bad news first. This will be the first one that's not in Italian because I'm German. The good news is I won't do it in German. So English might be the compromise we go for. So for today, I have the pleasure to discuss a bit the currency case, how we called it, or how advanced TV can evolve traditional currencies. And for the sake of this presentation, let's define advanced TV a bit because there's been a lot of terms around. So for this presentation, it's not only CTV, I would call big data, census measurement, addressable TV, like all of these terms that are not linear TV broadcast, we put it under the advanced TV. So let's kick it off. So anybody knows this guy? History buffs might. I didn't, I had to Google it, but let me help you. So this one is Kublai Khan, and he lived like close to 800 years ago, and he is famous for ruling one of the biggest land empires that ever existed. And a pretty famous Italian, Marco Polo, traveled actually his empire and was pretty much amazed of what he'd done. One thing stands out, though, that is important 800 years later, what this guy did for us in the media world. Because of the size of his empire, what he wanted to do, he wanted to foster trade and economic growth. And the idea he came up with was that he did something nobody has done before, introduced the first fiat currency in the world to his empire. And the reason he did it was because he wanted the merchants to travel safely. They shouldn't carry around all the gold and riches. And at the same time, he wanted to put out a currency that has the same value for everyone. So it makes trade easier, it makes travel easier, and it helped to grow the economy. Now, obviously, he was the Khan, it was his empire, so he had a lot of power to just force everybody to use it, and if not, he would just kill them. Luckily for us today, we came up with a better and much more intelligent idea on how to put an authority in the market. We invented the JICs, joint industry committees, empowered by the market to introduce a currency the market trades on to the market. So it's backed up by the market itself. You don't have to kill anybody anymore. Good news, right? So let's talk a bit about what currencies actually need in order to become part of a market. So first thing a currency needs is a use case to solve for. Inefficiencies of bartering, for example. So in our world today, one of the examples that is solving for is, for example, metrics for TV and reach, because that should be the same for everyone who's playing in this game. So there's a use case for this one that we have in the media world. The next one you need when you issue a currency to a market is you need some sort of authority. That can be a company like Nielsen does in the US, that can be in most European markets, joint industry committees, as I mentioned, because they are empowered by the market to issue something to it. But none of these things would really matter if one important point isn't there, and that is trust. The most important things currency need, and the data is coming out of it, is trust. So when you look at trust and what drives it, or how you put trust into a currency in a market believing in it, there are a couple of things. We focused on three things that I want to discuss a bit more deeply today. So first one is accuracy. If a currency is not accurate in the sense that it's complete and error-free, and error-free doesn't mean it's perfect, right? Nothing is perfect. But pretty error-free, then nobody would use it because it doesn't reflect the reality that's out there. And I'll give an example. So when you think about the advanced TV term, the way I defined it, agencies, advertisers, they use these type of data for their planning and campaigns already out there. So if a currency wouldn't reflect this type of data, it would lack a sort of completeness or accuracy in that sense that is not relevant for anyone. Luckily, many big jigs, and we've seen a lot of examples today, have started to integrate advanced TV data into their currencies exactly to be or stay accurate. The next one is completeness. So completeness as an example of, let's think of panels. Because for us as well, for most of the joint industry committees as well, panels are and should be the source of truth because they are one of the most unbiased data sets we have. But based on their nature, they are a snapshot of reality. They have limitations, right? Because they are just a snapshot. So limitation often comes with scale or sample size. So when you then think about the media world and all the presentations we've seen today, Granularity for ad campaigns, very specific distribution for content. The question comes up, how complete can panel measurement alone be? Or shouldn't we think about using advanced data in the sense of big data, for example, to enhance the source of truth we have and add scale to it? And then the last one is relevancy. If data wouldn't be relevant for the things that we do in the markets, nobody would use it anyway. And when it's not relevant, you wouldn't trust it because there's no reason to. So these three things, when you think about it, would basically, amongst others, define how trust would develop in something like a currency when you put it out there. So how to add advanced TV to a currency? That's the big question. There are two main things, and I think it's a scheme when you look at, and we'll go through some of the examples internationally, but also what we've seen here in Italy as well. There's a scheme on how to do it, and it requires two things. One is partnerships, one is comparability, and they depend on each other, sort of, but let's start with partnerships first. When you look at the advanced TV data sets that exist, thinking of SVOD, CTV, even OTT data, a lot of those data sets are not owned by companies that are historically part of a joint industry committee, hence they are not part of a currency. Sometimes because of politics, most often because of, I would call it digital heritage, because some of those companies have a digital background first. This is where they're coming from. And their measurement is digital, their thinking is digital, the way they distribute their content is digital, but the output to what the consumer sees is perceived as TV because it happens on the TV screen. So it's two worlds meeting and sometimes colliding. And the only way to solve for this is finding partnerships between those companies and the existing currencies that are in the market. And then it goes to the second point. Like the moment you have a partner, one thing that needs to be true for a currency and to integrate those partners into a currency is comparability. The data that comes out of a currency measurement, like the Khan did with his currency, it has to be comparable. It has to have the same value for everyone out there, and that shouldn't be an exception. So that is something that we have to make sure. Partnerships are often in European markets are driven by the jigs. The comparability part is something that we as service providers, our competitors, us ourselves, need to make sure that that happens with the technology methodology we provide. And then together you create this even level playing field that should serve everybody equally. So there's not one correct, before we go into this, there's not one correct way of doing this, right? Every market is different. Every market has specifics. And also every market wants to start from a different angle. And we see in a moment the different examples from the markets and where they start from. I think the challenge for all of us is to find what benefits the specific market best. But I think there's a lot to learn from looking into other markets and what they do, and then find those cases where we think it works for this specific market and trying to transfer, learn, and implement them. So we have some examples with Nielsen from the US, obviously. We look more into European parts. We have Italy, the Auditel-Audicom interoperability, we're quickly going to talk about. Poland, where we launched the Gauge. That's a different angle on how to look at advanced TV data and bring it to a market as a currency. And Germany as well, quickly, because it's one of the markets that is closer, also from structure, to what happens in Italy. So let's do US first. In the US, the currency panel that Nielsen operates is our source of truth, and it will be. So it has the size is around 45,000 homes. It's up to 101,000 individuals. But talking about the completeness point I mentioned earlier, there are limitations to the scale of the panel. So what Nielsen did is we combined the panel data we have with big data partnerships. So we had Roku Visio for ACR and then for RPD data, DirecTV, Dish, and Comcast. And we integrated those big data sets. It's up to 45 million homes and up to 75 million devices. And we tried to combine that with the source of truth at the panel. And no surprise, the way we did it is that we used the panel as the source of truth and calibrate and validate the big data sets that were coming in, because obviously they're coming from certain providers, so there's a certain bias in there. And the unbiased panel measurement is the source of truth to take all the bias out and validate it, and then, coming back to my earlier point, making the data comparable and putting it out in the market to have this respondent level data sets. And now it enables the market to trade on more granular ad campaigns, more specific content distribution. And you're overcoming this limitation of panels. No surprise, you're really proud of the fact that this has been MRC accredited earlier this year. And now this integration is live and it's going to move forward and we start to develop that further. Another example is closer to what we do here in Italy is Poland, because it's a European market. And I mean, we are fully aware that European markets were completely different to what happens in the US often. What we launched there is something called the Gauge. Many of you might know that from presentations, press releases, and things we've presented at other conferences. And it starts from a different angle. So in the US, the example I had was like big data integration to overcome limitations of a panel. That is one starting point to discuss advanced TV data. The other one could be looking at streaming content first. This is what has happened in Poland. The market was asking for streaming platform measurement on a higher level. So we came up with the idea of launching the Gauge there. And it's still panel-based, so using the panel that we have in Poland, which is the TV currency panel, and then enhanced it by streaming measurement to deliver the pie chart that we have on this slide, which is then splitting out linear TV broadcast together with the platforms. And it helps the agencies, advertisers to better understand where the consumers go and watch. But it also helps the broadcasters and publishers to understand how they probably should shape and plan for their own distribution or offerings for their own content to compete. Next one would be we call it the Auditel-Audicom operability, where we are looking at a different angle from a market perspective again. So now it's not SVOD platforms, now it's not big data for panels. This advanced TV approach looks at the local publishers first and strengthen the position of local champions to integrate their CTV audience offerings into the digital currency first. And then, so that's what's happening right now, where we are supporting massively to get that done. And then the next step would be that Nielsen talks to the JIC commissions about how we could make happen to add streaming platform, for example, into the same currency. But again, as I mentioned, every market has their own way of doing things. And Italy, I guess wisely, picked starting with local publishers first and doing that step by step. The last one, as an example, is the Amazon Netflix AGF partnership announcements. You've probably seen that in the press releases, it's the screenshots here, that AGF, as the German TV JIC, announced a partnership with Amazon and Netflix to integrate them into their panel-based measurement. And right now, that is work in progress, and us as well as the other service providers are collaborating with AGF to think about ways on how to make it happen. Also, coming back to the discussion I opened up earlier about comparability, and I guess everybody's eager to see what AGF and then the platforms will announce on this one. I think this one is specifically interesting for the Italian market because I mentioned earlier, AGF in Germany and Auditel in Italy, it's a very similar structure in terms of the market, with one very traditional, powerful JIC issuing a linear TV currency into the market and then now working on enhancing this moving forward. So I think when Italy looks what happens in Germany and the other way around, that will help a lot to learn. So accuracy, completeness, relevance. Those are the three main terms to grow trust into a currency. And those terms have been trademarks for the big currencies out there for years, and they still are. So this is not a speech about why currencies wouldn't work or we need to change something. It is the source of truth and is what the market needs. But advanced TV is there to stay. And luckily, we've seen a lot of markets. This is a development that has started, but we have to go through it and push that forward. And it has to be tackled now because we need the data to be there tomorrow when it becomes more important. And the two key aspects of making that happen is A, to seek partnerships. And in the US, it's companies like Nielsen trying to do that, which is sort of different because it's home turf for many of the streamers. In those markets like Europe, where the JICs are driving those markets, it usually goes through the JICs often. And then it's measurement that has to be comparable, which is then our task to make that happen. And in combination, this is what we need to try to tackle to create this even level playing field moving forward and transporting all of the beloved measurements we have into the future. So, I mean, the digital revolution, social media, platforms, streaming, and these type of things, it hasn't stopped, it's started, and it's accelerated now with the emergence of AI, right? So that's a turbocharger for this development. But in these complex markets, transparency and high standards become key. Without transparency, without comparable high standards for measurement, this will not work, and everybody needs to have this even level playing field to trade on. So that becomes crucial. So I probably can close this with the most German thing I can do. It's a quote from Goethe, who traveled Milan and loved it, by the way. And he said, "What is not started today is never finished tomorrow." So transferring that to what I talked about today and what we listened to in a lot of the presentations, if we do not start measuring advanced TV today together, it will not be reported tomorrow. But tomorrow, it will be much more important than today. Grazie mille. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for this presentation. I think we have 2 or 3 minutes for 2 quick questions, if you want. Let's sit here.
That's good.
Okay, so thank you. First of all, I heard you, and you said that trust in data is very important. First of all, so what is needed to build and keep this trust when we speak about advanced TV?
I mean, you had those 3 terms, right? And I think we need to make sure that we transfer those terms into the development that we need for the future. And we talked a lot about CTV, RPD data, a lot of examples out there, content measurement, ad measurement. And I think it's important that we keep the data relevant in the sense that we develop together the currencies in a way that they always reflect the market. I guess that's the first thing that you need in order to keep the trust in the data and to use it. And then accuracy, obviously.
Okay, so trust, accuracy, but also you mentioned need to compare data and also seeking partnerships and also the role of GICs.
Yeah.
Looking in particular at the Italian situation, what are, in your point of view, the most important steps to improve and get closer to the most advanced experience in the world?
I mean, Italy, when you look at Italy, and I had it on one of the slides with the interoperability, it is very advanced in the way this market has started to think about advanced TV and start to measure it. And I think this is the path pushing forward. Obviously, we have a lot of challenges with technology, methodology, and it comes down to what you mentioned before, comparability, make sure that everything we do is comparable. But I mean, the Italian market is very well on its way, and it was a great start. And now we need to go through this and hopefully together just expand this.
Okay, but you showed also some very interesting experiences from other countries. Is there one best practice that could be useful for our country, in your point of view?
Well, I mean, all of the countries have their strengths and weaknesses. I think the German market, because of its structure and because the way it works, is probably one of the closest to what happens in Italy. So having an eye on what is happening there and then learning from there and transferring knowledge into the Italian market is something that is worthwhile doing, and it goes both ways. So it's the same for Germany.
Italy and Germany are 2 similar countries in also for the role of the traditional TV.
Yes, exactly. So that is like when you look at the structure, the way it works, the way obviously also platforms would engage with the different stakeholders in the market is pretty similar. Also the setup, census measurement, panel as a source of truth, all these things are given in both markets.
Thank you, Michael. One last thing. If you had to give one short message to the Italian market, what it would be? One only.
I would go with a quote, I guess. Let's start measuring today, so it's reported tomorrow, because that's, I guess, the task for all of us.
Okay, perfect. So let's start today e guardiamo al domani. Thank you, Michael.